Welcome to the Prime Property Finance Podcast with Gareth Morgan and Mark Watts. This unique podcast will dive deep into all areas of property investing finance, going behind the scenes with property professionals, investors and clients. Between us, we have 35 plus years experience in property finance. The podcast has been launched to share knowledge, mindset requirements and experiences of successful investors and professionals. We aim to simplify many of the complicated areas of finance and investing and provide valuable and easy to implement tips. Keep an eye out for our new longer episodes every Tuesday and our shorter ones every Friday. One of the most uncomfortable topics in financial planning is also one of the most important. What happens if you're no longer here or if you lose the ability to make decisions? Most people assume their assets will simply pass to the right people, that their family will be able to manage things and that their business or their property portfolio will just carry on. But without the right legal structures in place, the reality can be very different. Delays, frozen accounts, legal costs, and huge stress for the people left behind. In this episode, I want to talk about two very simple but incredibly powerful tools in financial planning: a will and a lasting power of attorney. What they do, why they matter, particularly if you own property or run businesses, and why putting them in place is one of the most responsible financial decisions you can ever make. So there's 7 steps to this process that we'll like to go through. And the first one is why this matters more than people think. So many investors and landlords focus on buying property, growing portfolios and building businesses, but far fewer plan for incapacity, for death, for business continuity and asset transfer. So the key thing here you need to consider is that financial planning isn't just about building wealth, it's about protecting it as well. So you work so hard to build a portfolio, to run the business, to set it up, you take loads of risks. And if you imagine the difficulty and what you know in your head and the plans that you have for the future, if you don't protect it in the right way, then all that work and hard work can be undone and you are putting the house on the line. So we definitely don't want to be doing that. It's just understanding that. Step 2 is, what does a will actually do? So a will allows you to decide who inherits your assets, who manages your estate, who looks after your dependents, and how property and businesses are distributed. Without the will, then if you don't have a will, then the law decides who inherits it, and this may not reflect your wishes. So under the rules of intestacy, if you don't have a valid will in place, then you will basically just use the rules of intestacy, which basically means the government decides based on law how your assets should be distributed. So from a property investor's perspective, you need to consider things such as having multiple properties, company shares, personal guarantees, and any partnership arrangements that you may have. And all of a sudden, this can become very complicated. And without clear instructions, how are people supposed to know how to distribute your estate? And like you said, if you let the laws of intestacy decide, then that's not your choice. And if you imagine now trying to make a decision on one of the most difficult things about doing a will is trying to make a decision around what would you want to do if you died, and where do you want things to go, and how do you want things to be separated. And if you can't make that decision while you're alive, how do you expect other people to make those decisions in the correct way for you when you're not around? So that's the key part on that point. Point 3 is why investors should care even more. So for property owners, like I said, without the will, properties may become tied up in probate, refinancing may stall, businesses may lose direction, and partners may struggle to act. If you think about how properties could be tied up in probate, you will have seen, if you've got a tenant in a property, for instance, and that tenant stops paying rent and doesn't pay rent for 12 months, nobody's managing the property, the mortgage is not getting paid because the bank's account's been frozen, then the lender starts calling a debt and it just becomes messy. And, maybe there's an inheritance tax bill that your family need to pay, but they can't do that because they've got a tenant in situ who's not paying rent and they can't get them out, and it just becomes really, really messy. And you're expecting your family to deal with this when, one, they may or may not know how to do that, and two, may not be in a great frame of mind now that you're not here anymore. Some might be celebrating, but it's unlikely, and we say that in jest, of course. So things to discuss, here are around SPVs that you have, special purpose vehicles that you have for holding different property types and structures, any share ownership, portfolio management, who's going to deal with that, and then obviously family succession planning. Who do you want to inherit your companies if they're owned in a company, and who do you want to inherit your personally held properties? And obviously there are things to think about from a tax perspective. Step 4 is about lasting powers of attorney and making sure people understand what those are. So there are 2 types of lasting powers of attorney. The first one is the property and financial affairs lasting power of attorney, and that allows someone to manage on your behalf if you lose capacity, manage your bank accounts, manage your property, mortgages, bills, investments, businesses, etc. So you're still alive, but you've lost the mental capacity to be able to make decisions. So you entrust somebody to act on your behalf with your best interests in mind. So that's a property and financial affairs LPA. And then the second one is a health and welfare LPA. And that allows decisions to be made about medical treatment and care. So for instance, I heard a story of someone who was in a care home, quite a distance away from the family home. And actually there was a better care home facility literally across the road from the family home, and they wanted to get moved. But because the family didn't have a lasting power of attorney, they weren't able to make that decision to get them moved from one care home to another, which just meant there was a significant amount of additional travel, stress, cost involved in just to visit the family member. So had they had the health and welfare LPA in hand, then they could have made the decision to move from one care home to another, and a lot of the headaches, obviously not all the headaches, of course, will have gone away, but it does make life a little bit easier for your loved ones who are looking after you. Step 5 is, the piece that people miss often, and a lot of people will have a will in place, but a will only applies after death, whereas incapacity can happen while you're alive. So things such as having a major illness, having an accident, having a stroke, cognitive decline over time. And without having an LPA in place, family can't automatically access your finances. Accounts can be frozen, businesses can stall, mortgage payments can't be managed. So, there's quite a serious disruption that incapacity can actually cause, more so than death. And a lot of people have a will, but they don't have LPAs. And these two are so important, tying them together. Step 6 is why this matters more for business owners and investors. So for our listeners who run their own businesses or portfolios without an LPA, things such as lenders may become uncertain as to what the future holds. Directors may not be able to act in the correct manner. You might be the sole director of a company, and then what happens if something happens to you? There's nobody in place to be able to make decisions on behalf of the company. So therefore, companies can struggle to operate. Properties may not be able to be managed because you may be the only contact in that company that an estate agent and as a lender has, solicitors, etc. And there's no plan in place. And that just creates further stress for families and partners at exactly the wrong time. Part 7 is there is good news. These tools are really simple. Both a will and a lasting power of attorney are 1, affordable, 2, straightforward, but 3, hugely powerful. And they can prevent years of complications and stress and cost, which with a bit of foresight, can easily be put in place. So hopefully that was a nice, easy roundup as to the importance of a will and powers of attorney. You want to think about the issue with a will and a power of attorney. It is a life admin, and life admin gets put aside most of the time when we're on the wheel of life, on the rat race of life, chasing things, running around with work, with personal affairs, with kids clubs and schools and whatever it may be that you have with a busy, noisy business. And what I would class a will in quadrant 2, it's a quadrant 2 task, which is a important, important, but but non-urgent task. And those are the really ones that people keep missing out on. So one thing I would urge you is to get this sorted. If you can take the time to get it sorted, your family and your loved ones and your beneficiaries of your estate will be very grateful to you later on in life. So just to close then, building wealth is only one part of financial planning. Protecting it and making sure the right people can manage it if something happens to you is just as important. If you're running a business, holding property or building a portfolio, having a will and lasting power of attorney in place isn't pessimistic, it's responsible planning. If you haven't looked at this yet, it's worth taking the time to do so. Your future self and your family will thank you for it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope you have learned something and have some tips to take away. We'd be very grateful if you enjoyed the show. You could give us a review and share with anyone that you know that may be interested. And of course, subscribe to the show so you can get notified when a new episode is released. If you'd like us to answer any questions or go deeper on a specific topic, please drop us a message at primeproperty.finance. See you on the next episode.